began politics. He worked his way up in the ranks and moved into the regal social status of Russia. Women were obsessed with him, and ambitious men would lavish him with gifts, fine food, and plush environments. Rasputin was an advisor, a spiritual leader, and a major charlatan, a master charlatan. Okay, so in my story, I diverge from the accepted historical account. In mine, the Tsar becomes so angered with his wife and his brood of 3 girls and 1 sickly son that he orders the death of the Tsarina by poisoning. On that wretched day, a drop of cyanide was added to the Tsarina's morning meal, her last meal. Rasputin was also murdered by a rifle in a dark corner of the castle one restless night. In death, the Tsarina would spend her days admiring her children and haunting the Tsar. Invisible to mortals, the flies that followed her would torment the Tsar for the rest of his life. Now, the occult also did not rest, and Rasputin would return as well, sometimes as himself, and other times as a large rabbit. So do not assume that your actions will elicit a reaction. Sometimes the result will be human, and sometimes when retribution wells up, it returns as a ghost. That's the story.
So what, 15 years ago you started?
So 15 years ago, I mean, I painted for years, but about 15 years ago, I made these. There's a 4th painting. The paintings are called the Ural Mountain series, and I was fascinated with the Romanovs, and so I started the series. I also have more paintings. I have 3 or 4 other paintings of the series. And so this did not occur like 2 days ago, right before the war. I decided to do a Russian theme. I'm sorry about that, but remember, these characters were killed by the Bolsheviks. They actually did not have a pleasant ending as well. They died, and in my story, they return as ghosts. Transmigration is a theme that I've used many times. One of the first installations I did was about transmigration, where the humans or animals would come back in a different form, and each one I would tell about their history and where they ended up and why they ended up as what they did. And so I continue the transmigration theme with these pieces, but more about the 2 characters. It was a big production. It took me, so I was awarded a grant from For Culture, and it was going to be a 1-year project, but the pandemic was going, and the gallery I don't think was even open a year in to the pandemic. So it got, on hold, postponed another year. And of course, some people would go, okay, I'm done with my project, and I'm not going to continue. But I decided to continue for another year and do a 2-year project. But as I was saying earlier, it's comforting, I think, for an artist to be doing their work during this time, right? It actually brings a normalcy to your life, which was so upended. Everybody was ended by this. The armatures were very difficult. My friend Mona Smiley Fairbanks, she worked with me. She's like amazing with meticulous measurements. She got the measurements of the real horse, right? And she kept making me paper prototypes, right? So it started out like this big, like a pony. Like, no, it has to be spectacular. So it has to be really gigantic. So she kept making the paper prototype. And then she built it out of plywood, right? So it's like, it was 2 pieces of plywood, and then this is the legs come off, actually. So then she hands it over to me. They actually put it together at the house. She took the jigsaw and cut certain pieces. I want this chain on the. So she handed it over to me, and then I had to decide how it actually was going to work, how I was going to felt on wool onto wood, and how I was going to place the chicken wire. So usually my frames are made out of chicken wire because it's very light and substantial, sturdy, very sturdy, and it doesn't add a lot of weight to the pieces. When I was first doing them, I was stuffing them as well, and it wasn't even necessary to do that. So anyway, so then I had to figure out how to felt onto wood. So I used stuffing and padded the legs, and I also had to think about the legs had to be weighted, right? Because just with the wood, they wouldn't be substantial enough and weigh enough to hold all this, right? And the body. So I got curtain weights, leaded curtain weights, and put those in the bottom of the hooves, and then built the chicken wire around these two flat pieces of wood to start making it dimensional. Then I stuffed all that for the horse, right, in the shape that I wanted. And carefully began felting. Usually what I do is I use cheap flat acrylic felt that comes in bolts, and I take the wool and I work the wool into those pieces so I can cut them into the shapes that I need for each piece. So that's usually how I work. And then you just had to felt very gently into the padding, into the chicken wire, into the wood, so I wouldn't break the needles. On this project, actually, I didn't break as many needles. On the alien project, I broke hundreds of felting needles. But this one, actually, I didn't break as many. So I would take I'd be working on the leg, and I usually work on the couch at home, and I'd put the leg, sit it on me, and just work on it. This was a pretty delicate process, right? So you had to avoid the wood, and then you had to continue to make the shape, to make the dimensionality for the piece. And the skirts, I wanted to have them, for the most part, this one has a big petticoat, but the other ones, I wanted them to also have volume, so I bought hoop skirts for girls' quinceañeras. I ordered those petticoats from Amazon, and then I had to figure out is this gonna fit this piece, and the size, and then the skirts each took about 2 months to felt. And Rasputin, I used a soft mannequin, and I felted right onto that, and then made the head how I wanted, built up the head, and the ears come off. I tried to make everything as travel worthy as possible so that you didn't have to carry the entire piece. So the skirts come off, the hoops come off, the stands come off, and you can fold up everything and put them into bags. So now that I'm working larger and larger, that is another aspect that I have to think about when I work. Any questions? Yes.
What did you use for the nails of Rasputin?
I used some kind of I think it was like a shell bead of some sort that was made into that shape, like a horn shape. And then I put them into the chicken wire and stitched them, and then I felted them in. Everything I do is a pain in the ass. Really. There's a lot of fussy work, like, how do I do this? How do I finish this piece? So it's kind of like I'm learning as I go along, a new adventure every time.
And I can keep asking questions. Okay. And you guys, if somebody else wants one, jump on that. But anyway, the hands with the minor chakras in them, what does that mean to you? With the eyes, I guess?
The eyes are a mystical thing, the third eye. And Rasputin was all about mysticism. Some of it real and some of it not. Some of it that he invented himself. And I've always found the single eye to be very compelling. And I've put it in a lot of my pieces.
So the hand, her hand, is that a chicken wires?
How I made, oh my God, that was a terrible one. She has two of them, but, so I bought these like 80s black mesh gloves, and then I stuffed them, stuffed the hands. Then I took and put wire in each finger, and then I felted the wool on them. It was a lot. That was a lot working on those.
So you can actually
They're
mold the
bendable.
hands. Yeah.
Yes, they bend in the shape. That was a super fussy one as well. And the locket, the love locket behind you, that one was on wood, and Mona made those cutouts too out of wood. And then I made the two pieces flat and measured them and then just adhered them. And then, of course, the 1970s pom-poms on the back with a hot glue gun.
Maybe you're gonna be mad at me for saying this. Could you give us a tour of the editing? Last
I'll
time
give
I
you a
said this-
tour.
Last time I told her this in the
I was
middle of the
like-
thing, and she's like, and then you said, Mimi, could you give us a tour?
Check this out. And there, of course, is Max. The Romanovs had lots and lots of pets. So if you'll see in the small felted paintings that there's lots of animals. They had, every child had a pet, and the parents had pets, and the mother had a pet, yes. Birds and snakes and everything, rabbits. This is the spring train, and there's a little drawing of it, how she wears it. The train, this is like the back of the train, and her arms would go through that cowl section of it, and then the train would be behind her. This was the first piece I made for the show, and it took a really long time. It's about 15 feet long. I started with one, so in order to get this mottled effect, I start with one color on one side and another color on the other side. And then I pierce the needle through, and it pushes the other color through. And it's really tedious. It takes a long time, but that's how that happened. And then, first of all, I did a little research on the flowers of Siberia, because I thought that would be interesting. And then I, of course, diverged into my imagination and started just making whatever flowers and colors I decided on. But anyway, that's her train she wore in the spring. This one right here is called They Remain Linked. So it is Rasputin and the Tsarina together. And of course the symbol of the eye, and then the snake, which means trouble, right? Getting involved with the charlatan Rasputin was trouble. So over here, this is the white winter gown. And I think she would wear this one to balls. She would wear this one. And she had an enormous wardrobe. And they also had every jewel imaginable. So she had her choice of what she wear. And they would all come in, all her maids would come in and dress her and decide what jewels would go with what she was wearing that day. And I believe she changed clothes quite often, because in her early years of marriage, she was very bored, that she had nothing to do. She was not allowed to do anything but to walk a little bit in the gardens, and she couldn't participate. The only thing she could participate in food-wise was the morning menu, was the breakfast menu. And that was it. She couldn't participate in other things. And they all dressed her, they brushed her hair, they groomed her, they bathed her. And she actually was bored. She actually later on, when the war was out, she became a nurse. But she worked with Rasputin, and they kind of pushed the Tsar aside. Rasputin had bright blue eyes and dark, greasy long hair. He was very tall, very unattractive, but they were fascinated with him. And all the men, like, that were in the palace that had political aspirations, they wanted to be next to Rasputin because he began advising the Tsar. So he had lots of influence and power. So these three hangings were they're just wall hangings that I made that you would see in the palace. And lots of the Russian art was very over-gilded, over the top. So I thought those pom-poms would be a perfect addition because in their clothes they also wore lots of ermine and fur, and so I wanted to add that. These little boxes, and there's one outside in the window, these are the treasure boxes, and the Romanovs hid lots of their treasures, right? So these treasures came over as ghosts. And the one at the top is the Fabergé egg, and this one is the hat when the Tsarina, of course, would do a little bit of writing, light writing, maybe perhaps her diary, what she wore that day, how many gowns, and what jewels, or what they had for breakfast. So this is the hat that she would wear. She was very eccentric, but she was also incredibly stern. She did not have much patience for anything. It was similar to me. Okay. So this is like so speaking of that, this is the blue temper gown. So when she was, which is just completely obvious. And she would strut around that, and everyone would get out of the way because they knew she was in the mood. This piece over here is the last piece the Tsarina wore before she was murdered. And she had stitched into the gown, on the inside of the cape, she had stitched "Remember," because she wanted people to remember history and not to forget. So that's that piece. The sad piece, her death gown, her death cape. And then all these pieces. So, as a ghost, the Tsarina holds Rasputin. She's headless and he's bodiless. Do you want me to read you the little captions for these?
Sure.
This one. Sometimes the Tsarina's cape would just take to the sky. Rasputin looked on confident the cape would return. And that's that one. This one. The Tsarina was pleased she could continue to ride, which she was extremely proficient at. Georgina was a fine horse, even faster as a ghost. And then, is that this, were we going this way?
Yes.
Then? Okay, so the yellow one. It says, as a rabbit, Rasputin's influence had been diffused. Instead of power, he was infused with a ghostly wisp of mischief. Then the next one, the green one. The Tsarina took everything in stride. Inside the treasure boxes were many surprises, some good, some bad. Like the treasure box outside has a giant fly. So I would consider that a bad treasure. The next one, the last one at the top, Rasputin discovered one of the treasure boxes, valuable when he was alive and worthless as a ghost. Then do we go back to here?
Yes.
Now that the Tsarina transmigrated, the living were engulfed with flies. The castle buzzed with the cadre of Musca domestica, which is a fly. Oh, really? Next. Rasputin was reunited with an old comrade. Today, they would celebrate with red wine and song. And then this one with the cat. The Tsarina soon realized that one of her cats had also returned as a ghost. Olaf's soft paw was a welcome surprise. And the next one with the dog. The Tsarina was pleased to see Max, her standard poodle. Unfortunately, he had a lot to say when they reunited. And then the last one is saying goodbye to our future selves. The Tsarina and Rasputin return as ghosts. That's it, thank you.